So let's continue. We somewhat understood the idea with which the Rambam gives an answer to this question, the question of how can you have any description of God, and how can God know even if knowing already predicts that there is a knower and the thing that you know and the knowledge that you know it with. So the Rambam explained that this is all one, and although in a human knowledge you always have the knower, the knowledge, and the thing that is known, in the godly sense, this is all part of one thing, and therefore it's not a contradiction, it's not a problem, it's all good, and everybody can be happy. But not everybody was happy. So this concept you see on page 9, okay? This concept can be clarified by prefacing with the challenge to the Rambam statement made by the Gaon and the Kabbalist, Rabbi Yehuda Lev ben Betzalel, the Maharal of Prague. You know, I'm sure you heard of the Maharal in Prague. He's very famous for his creature. It's golem that he made in Prague in order to safeguard the Jews. But he had done some other stuff too. So he was a very deep philosopher and Kabbalist, and he wrote many books. And he was also the mentor of the Tosfos Yom Tov, who is a famous commentator on the Mishnah, on the Talmud. And one of the famous books of the Maharal is Gevuras Hashem. It's a philosophical work. And over there, in the Gevuras Hashem, he objects strongly the approach of those who describe God with the expression, He's the knower and He's the knowledge, and elaborates in an utter rebuttal of this idea, saying, so he's now going to first quote what the Rambam says, and then he's going to disprove it. He's going to say, behold, they say that God's essence is pure, abstract knowledge. Yeah, this is what the Rambam says, that knowledge is an essential part to God, but it's a different type of knowledge. Now, every intellectual conceptualization involves knowing an object within one's soul as it exists outside of one's soul. So, knowing always predicts that there is something outside. Because if everything would be one, there would be nothing to know. Hence, by describing God as knowledge, one implies that his existence is dependent on the entities that come into being as a result of him. He's saying like this. He raises, I think, in an unbelievable way, a question which is even stronger with the way we raised it. We said, essentially, if you're going to say God's knowledge is part of him, and then you're already breaking him up to parts. He's saying even more than that. He's saying, if you say God is knowledge, and it's an essential thing of him, that means if he doesn't know, he doesn't exist. You understand the problem? It's a new way of asking the question. If I say that there is me, there is my knowledge, and there is things that I know, then the problem is there is me, there's the knowledge, and the things that I know. What's your answer? Well, it's all one. It's your essence. It's all my essence. That means if I don't know, then I don't exist. Right? Because if my essential existence is knowledge, then if I don't know, I don't exist. That would mean that God's existence is dependent on his knowledge. So that means he's dependent on the things that he knows. What are the things that he knows? Creation. So God's existence is dependent on creation? So he's not a existence coming from his essence, and it's not an unconditional existence, it's a conditional existence. So you cannot say that his knowledge is his essence. In whatever way you're going to describe knowledge, because that means that if he doesn't know, he doesn't exist. So it's already a condition to his existence. Yes?
Is God's creation part of God or separate?
No, it's for sure part of God. Yeah. Why?
But we can count God and the creation.
Yeah, we discussed this problem last lesson. It's a problem. It's a problem to say this. Yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem to say that there is a creation. So there, we don't, and then therefore, if you remember, we came to the conclusion that ultimately, by logic, I have to say that there is no creation. Well, but therefore I have faith that there is a creation. And that's only based on revelation of the Torah, because I believe in the Torah. The Torah says God created the world. If it wouldn't say that, I wouldn't believe that there is a world. Because it logically wouldn't make sense that there is a world. There's a famous saying, joke, that the Kabbalist and the philosopher meet. And the Kabbalist tells the philosopher, the difference between me and you are thinking of God the whole day, and I'm thinking of the world the whole day. So the philosopher says, well, what a compliment, thank you very much. He says, no, you're misunderstanding. You are sure that you exist. And all you're thinking about the whole day, does God exist or doesn't he exist? I am sure logically that God exists. My problem is, if there's a God, then I don't exist. So my question is, do I exist or don't I exist? And therefore you think the whole day about God because that's your dilemma. I'm thinking about the whole day about creation because that's my dilemma. It's a pretty strong statement. It's the same idea that we're saying here. So he says, this is the problem with saying that God and his knowledge are one. Because that would mean that God's essence is his knowledge. And if God's essence is his knowledge, that would mean that him knowing makes him. So if he doesn't know, he doesn't have knowledge, he wouldn't exist. There's no larger heresy than that, to say that God's existence is dependent on something. So turn the page to page 11. And now we'll read what he says. After all these explanations, line 4. After all these explanations, however, the entire concept is of no value. Look at him. He's like, whatever the Rambam says, it's just BS. It doesn't have any value. It's nothing. For intellect has a specific definition. One would say that it is the comprehension of the concept as it is. God, by contrast, has no definition that can describe him. So here's raising another issue, another question. If God, it's not only the problem that if God's essence is knowledge, that if he doesn't know, then he doesn't exist. There's another problem. What about the knowledge that he knows? So if the knowledge, what do we say? He is the knower, he is the knowledge, and he is the known thing. Now let's ask about the known thing. If he knows himself, the only thing that you can know is a limited thing. If he is infinite, you cannot know him. So if you say that God is knowable, then you are making him into a finite. And that's another problem. So look at page 12. Therefore it is foolish for those to say that his essence is intellect. He basically calls Rambam fool or foolish for saying it. Instead, God cannot be defined at all. Rather, then how do we answer the original question? The question of Zoli and all the philosophers. We describe God with many descriptions. So how come these descriptions, how can we say descriptions of God? We say that he's a simple entity without any definition. You cannot describe him. This matter cannot be described as intellect, obviously. Because if it's intellect, then you would describe him. No, he's not intellect. He's not intellect at all. He's nothing. You can't describe him with anything. For we cannot know his being and his nature. And that shouldn't be surprised because that's what God is. It's an ununderstandable thing. If one would say that he is and so we can answer the following. No, 1 second, I'm sorry. We'll skip this now. I just want to go to his answer. So, look at in truth. In truth, however, page 18 on the bottom. In truth, however, so now, before we go to this, so basically, if we say that whatever the Rambam said is foolishness, and God is undescribable and has no attributes, and even logic and intellectual capacity and intellectualism as an intellectual attributes themselves are not an essential part of him, then what about, last question, what about the Sefirot? We said that God can be described by the Sefirot, right? We even said that God created us in His image, so He has an image, and that image is the Sefirot. So what do we say about that? And the top of the Sefirot is what? Is Chokhmah, is logic. So that's the most essential description of God. How do we solve this problem? So he answers like this. In truth, however, the level of Chokhmah is, so the first attribute of the Sefirot already is actually considered as a physical action in relation to the Holy One, blessed be He. We'll get to what that means. For He is of an entirely different nature of being, holy and distinct, and simple in the ultimate of simplicity. It is impossible for Him to be perceived by man's knowledge while a person is alive, because this quality is something that man does not possess. And the potential to relate God's simplicity is described by the term emunah. This is where you need emunah, because God is ununderstandable. So you need emunah, you need faith for that, to believe in His essence, which is elevated and exalted an infinite number of levels above the level of Chokhmah, which is the most elevated potential possessed by created beings. We cannot think of anything else than Chokhmah. If you ask, where do our dimensions start and stop? By logic. Logic is although a person cannot conceptualize what God is with his knowledge, Okay, we'll stop here. So, okay, just read it. We'll finish the reading. Okay, although a person cannot conceptualize what God is with his knowledge, he can relate to it. He can relate to this level through emunah, believing with perfect and firmly established faith that this is the reality. This is the verse of the Shtor when it says, "I'm your God, your Lord," meaning I am who I am. This is what He told Moses. I will be who I will be. This is the level of God's essence. His being and His essence, which no thought can grasp and recognize what He is, except Him alone. This is sufficient for a person of understanding. Connection to this utterly transcendent level is desired purpose of the commandment of faith. So this is, basically we got to the end of the section. The answer is that based on this, the idea of faith is needed because the level of the essence of God cannot be understood. I will take your question in a second. I just want to draw down a little bit, make a little drawing here of God. I'll draw God now. So there is the Rambam and there is the Maharal on one side of the story. Then the other side of the story is we have two terms. We have faith and knowledge. And we have the commandment of faith. So we have two answers. One is the commandment of faith, right? Because we asked, how can you command faith? So one answer was, simple answer was, it's really knowledge. You need to deepen your knowledge of God in order to have love for him and fear for him, right? That was one answer. The other answer was no. There is a commandment of faith. Why? Because to know God, that's obvious. But you cannot know God fully. You will never understand the essence of God, because the essence of God is above knowledge. This was one part of our discussion. Then we said, okay, so let's look at it this way. What is God's essence? So the Rambam said, God's essence, here is God, its essence, and then here is creation. So what did the Rambam say? God's essence is knowledge. Right? It's a different type of knowledge than what we have. Because if it would be the same type of knowledge, then you would say that there is him, he has knowledge, and the thing that he knows. But no, in this case, knowledge is part of him, and the thing that he knows is part of him. So actually, it's this. So it's all in God. Right? I'm just making up this drawing as we go, but I'm sure you'll appreciate it. The Maharal says, no. This is the essence of God. And this is the process of creation, and this is creation. Well, knowledge is somewhere here. The essence of God is in the undescribable. When I say, he made a term, knowledge is like physical action. Right? Physical action is using that term to say, you can ask questions about his knowledge the same way you can ask questions about creation. So you say, how can there be a creation outside of him? Yeah. And how can there be a knowledge outside of him? But knowledge is a phenomena which is not part of his essence. It's not essential to him. He created the tools of knowledge. And actually, knowledge is that's why knowledge is part of the Sefirot. So when we stand here and look at him, we see through the Sefirot. We don't see essence. We see through the Sefirot, and therefore we describe him with the descriptions that the Sefirot led us to describe. But indeed, if you would be speaking about his essence is undescribable. And this is, according to, basically the Maharal is taking the second answer. He's saying, for this, you need faith. For this, you need knowledge. Your own knowledge. Meaning, you can understand God on these levels, but you cannot understand him on this level. And therefore, you need faith for this level. So basically what we're saying here is that on the most essential level, God's essence has no description, cannot be described in any way, and all descriptions that we give of God is only from our perspective, from the perspective of creation, because even the descriptions that seem essential to him, from our point of view, are created phenomena, and they are created the same way this piece of wood is created. So the same question, you can ask a question, so how does it work if it's him and the creation? But that's the same question you can ask about the parts of him that could be understood towards creation. I'm not sure if you guys get what I'm saying, but I hope. Did you get more or less my point? Not really. Okay, so let's try again. Okay. We asked before. We had earlier with a question that it says in the Zohar, Leis machshava tfisa bei. There is no thought that can grasp him. And we also said that God told Moses, you cannot see my face. And God told Moses, my name is I will be who I will be. On the other hand, we do see that God describes himself. So for example, God says, God has names, right? We spoke about the 7 holy names. Each name is a different description of God. So what the Maharal is saying, any description that you give of God is just a description of God's relationship with you. It's the description of God's relationship with the creation. There is no description of the essence of God, because the essence of God is undescribable, it's ultimate, it's infinite, etc., etc. And therefore, on the question of where is the place of knowledge and where is the place of faith, the answer we can give is, you can know God as He relates to you, and you can have faith in the essence of God. Now it's more clear?
That's the Maharal.
Maharal. Yeah, the Rambam was. Let's leave the Rambam, because the Rambam will tell you that no, you can. There's no. Actually, the Rambam will say almost like there's no place for faith, because everything can be measured by knowledge. The only issue why you do need faith is because though I say that knowledge is part of His essence, it's such a different type of knowledge that doesn't make sense. So you end up again with something which is undescribable. You're describing it, but you're describing it in a way that cannot be understood. Therefore, there is a place to say that for this level you need faith. Understand?
So the Rambam says that even God's essence is logical, but you just don't have the right logic?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a different type of logic.
Mm-hmm.
The Maharal says, no, wait. If it's logic, no matter which type of logic, you're describing it. Okay. So, we still have another 40 minutes, and before we go further, there was a mention here of Olam HaTzilus, and you asked, what is Olam HaTzilus, right? Just right by the question. Or no, when he said that the Kabbalists agree with the Rambam on the level of Olam HaTzilus. So, we're going to just run through a very basic concept of Kabbalah that is used as one of the most basic ideas in Hasidus, and this is the idea of the 4 worlds. Okay? So Kabbalah says, when we speak of creation, creation is not just a physical phenomenon. So people tend to think spirituality is part of God, and creation is the physical existence. We don't believe in that. We say even ideas are created, right? Just like we explained before about logic. Logic itself is a created phenomenon. So the Kabbalah says creation, when we say God created the world, we don't only mean universe. God created the universe. The universe is just a very low level of creation. There is actually 4 realms that God created, and these 4 realms are the 4 worlds of Kabbalah. They are what is called in another term, Seder HaIshtalshelus, the order of, how do you say Ishtalshelus, Dr. Kegel?
They have a very fancy translation for it, which is concatenation.
Concatenation.
Yeah, because the root of concatenation in English is from the Latin conatus or something like that, which means chain.
Chain. So it's an order of chains, I would say.
Because it's a chain, yeah. Because
the order of chaining.
In Hebrew, Ishtalshelus comes from chain also.
Shalshelet.
is a chain, so Ishtalshelus is a chain.
Shalshelet, by the way, is a type of chain like this, which goes around. This is a shalshelet. Okay?
Don't you mean that it links one?
No? It's also that it's like this.
Yeah.
It's somehow both. I don't know, don't ask me why or how, but we have to say it's like this too. So it's a type of thing that has repeated images or repeated circles on a different level. Like you mentioned from...
helix.
What?
It's called helix in mathematics.
Helix?
Helix.
Greek word.
This is called helix or this?
H-E-L-I-X.
This or this?
No, but-
The first one.
Well, the first one is a spring word. Helix is two, right?
No.
Like in genetics? Oh, that's a double helix. Yeah, double helix, sorry.
So it's really a chain of helix.
Yeah.
So it's the order of chain of helix. That's the Seder Ishtalshelus, which is like this. It says there is, let's draw again. So here is God. and he creates. And he creates 4 realms. And these 4 realms are 4 worlds, as we call them. So the 4 worlds are Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. So that is Atzilut, Beria, Yetzira, and Asiya. These 4 worlds are a chain because there is 10 Sefirot in each world. There is a chain of 10 ideas that repeat themselves in each world. So ultimately, the creation is done by these 10 attributes. And these 10 attributes create in each world on a lower level. So you have the 4 worlds, and you have the 10 Sefirot in each world that repeat themselves. But they just repeat themselves on a different level, on a lower level. And the bottom part of Atziya is the physical realm. I guess that's the universe, in a simple sense. Okay? So, when we speak of creation, and we think of the universe, it's just a very minor part of this whole story. There's 4 worlds above us, and on the top of the whole thing, the top, so-called, is Ein Sof, is the infinite essence of God, let's say, in a simple sense. So, how should we imagine these 4 worlds? So first of all, let's just translate each one. Asiya means action. Yetzira means formation. Bria means creation. And Atzilus has 2 meanings. Either it's from the word etzel, which means next to, or it means lehatzil. Lehatzil means to
save.
No, not with the hey, with the aleph. Lehatzel. So when I give over my spirit to you, how would you say that in English? Lehatzel min haruach. Moses stood next to the 70 sages and he gave over from his spirit to them. How would you say that?
Well, usually to emanate.
Emanate.
Yeah.
So, actually it should be the other way around if we look at it from God's point of view. I'll get to why. So basically what the Kabbalah says, we can break up these 4 to 2 major parts. There is a huge curtain here, parsa, which means curtain. Obviously this is all in spiritual terms. So what is this? Basically, it's like we're dealing with the issue, and practically we can say all of Kabbalah and all of Chassidus deals with one major question, and this is the question we are dealing with here, this last session. And everybody's like, what is Shlomo talking about? I don't know what he's saying. He's really flying away. What is the major question here? The question is finite and infinite. They contradict each other. On one hand, I have to say, logically, that finite existence predicts there is an infinite existence. On the other hand, infinite existence doesn't leave space for finite existence, because this is such a contradiction that is the source of all the problems. This is where we always run into the wall. So, what's the relationship between God and his finite infinite God and finite creation. How can you, these things are so contradictable, they're so against one another, that it's impossible to see how there is a connection. So it's almost like saying Kabbalah is trying to make a bridge between the two. It's trying to make like a process, a long process, through which this contradictory existence of finite things can come out of the infinite. So Seder Ishtalshalus is like a long process. So you say it's infinitely far away from us. Yeah, but let's make like a very long bridge and we'll get to you. Well, Leo can ask, well, why do you need this bridge? It's anyways, at the end of the day, it's whatever level you're going to get to is going to be still a finite level. It's going to be with the same gap. So let me just explain. The gap between 1 and 1,000 is measurable. The gap between 1 and 1,000,000 is way much more than the gap between 1 and 1,000, but it's still comparable gap, right? It's still comparable. So, but the gap between 1 and the infinite is infinite. And it's going to be the same infinite gap between 1,000 and infinite. So if so, we don't really gain in essence too much by making this bridge. Because at the end of the day, the first level, here, somehow, here, between the first level and the total infinite, you're going to still stay with the same infinite distance than from here to here, right? If this is 1 and this is 1,000, it's still the same further away from the infinite, right? So you're not gaining anything. You're saying, I'm building a bridge between the infinite and the finite. Yeah, but you're not gaining anything because infinite is going to be infinitely away, distant from the finite, no matter how high that finite is. So that's a good question. One second. That's a good question. That's what Leo asked last class. And I answered, yes, true. The Kabbalah says God could have created straight from here to here without this whole long bridge here. He just did it. So when we stand here, we should have like a whole set of glass that we can see through the infinite and think that we know Him. But it's just for our sake. It's not for the sake of creation. Creation doesn't become easier, so-called, because there is this bridge. It doesn't become easier. The problem doesn't become less of a problem. The contradiction between infinite and finite is just for us. Yes, your question.
But if we had not 4 boxes, but infinite many boxes, then we could approach the infinite God.
No, but again, by the way, it does say that there is infinite number of worlds. So Kabbalah speaks about 4, but actually there is infinite number. Number 1. Number 2, again, you're mixing up infinite of mathematics and infinite of Chassidus. Infinite God is not infinite in this sense, like infinite number of worlds. Infinite God is the undescribable everything and nothing. The untangible existence by its essence. And one second, and the infinite number of worlds won't get closer to it because it's going to be an infinite number of worlds. But the so-called closest world to Him is still going to be the same furthest away from, because it's finite, it's describable at a certain logic.
But if he is completely undescribable,
Yeah.
then we don't have any job to do. We cannot describe him.
Yeah, and that's why if He would be, and yes, exactly. But since, for whatever reason, God wanted that we should have a relationship with Him, He cheated us a little bit and made Himself a little bit describable. Not Himself, but He made these, I guess, realms through which, if I look from down up, it will seem to me like I understand something. But you're right. Ultimately, in regards to His essence, we don't really have a job to do because it's not describable. Right. Okay, but before we get lost in His essence, because that's like the highest level, let's just speak about the 4 worlds. So what do these 4 worlds mean? How would I imagine these 4 worlds? So obviously we're not saying this. So simple. So it says in Kabbalah that the world of Asiya is mostly bad. The world of Yetzirah is like 25% bad and 25% good and 75% bad. The world of Bria is 75% good and 25% bad. And Atzilut is fully good. What does that mean? And obviously, we're not speaking about a physical existence. We're speaking about some spiritual perspective. So there is a letter of the Rebbe where he explains very nicely, he gives a very nice metaphor for everybody. It can be understood for anyone. So we're speaking about existence. And imagine you're watching an existence, you're watching something, the existence around you. Depending on from what point of view, from what perspective are you watching, you're seeing something else. So let's say you're sitting in a theater and there is 4 different perspectives. There is the perspective of the author of the play. There is the perspective of the main character acting in the play. There is the perspective of the viewer, the crowd, and there's a perspective of, how you say, Dislat Munkash, the guy that brings in and takes out the props, like a simple guy.
Stage manager.
Question: if there is Atzilut is the best word, then it's not a contradiction that only Ein Sof can be the best word?
Wait,
Because you said that
it's no contradiction yet. Wait. So let's now get back to our metaphor, okay? We'll get to the end of the metaphor, you'll understand better. And if you still have the question, we'll get back to your question. So we say now, you're sitting in the theater, there is the author, or maybe it's the author and the rendezvous, how you say the
Stage managers.
no, how you say rendezvous? Director. The author and the director, the same person. Sometimes in good plays it's the same person. Then there is the main character acting. Then there is the crowd that you use. And then there is the stage manager. So they're all in the same play, in the same room. They're all watching the same thing, but they're all seeing something else, right? So what does the stage manager see? He's the lowest level. He doesn't even know what they're talking about. He's not interested, doesn't know. If you would watch the whole play, I'm sorry for stage manager. It doesn't mean that every stage manager is the same.
Sorry, this is not a good example because I know for sure everybody get the script and you have to know when you come on stage.
Wait.
No matter if you are-
Before you judge the metaphor, wait. So, looking from the point of view of the props guy, the stage manager, it's not necessarily so, but it's so for the sake of the metaphor, okay? So he doesn't know what's behind the meaning of this play. Every play has a message, right? To be a good stage manager, you don't need to understand what the message of the play is. You can be just knowing, as you said, when you have to come in, when you have to go out, when you have to put up this prop, when you have to take it off that prop. Your idea is not to understand what is the core message of this theater, this play, and how that message comes about to be revealed in every particle and every element of this play. And it's not your job. Your job is to take in a prop and take out a prop. And it could be that you're getting high on a bottle of vodka and you have no clue what's flying. You don't know what the message is. And you don't even definitely not know why it's important for that message to come through by putting a prop in a certain place and not another place. It's none of your business. You know that prop has to be there, has to be taken down by a certain hour, and that's it. That's the prop manager. Then we have the viewer. So most guys go to the theater. At least they want to catch the main message. So when they go out of the play, they have a discussion. So what do you think about the message of the author here? So at least they'll get the storyline and the main message of the story. But let's be honest, many of them don't catch the main message. So they'll ask 1 out of 100 of the viewers will tap on and say the same answer, what was the message of this play, as the author himself thought. Okay?
Yetzirah. You say Yetzirah?
We're not saying.
We are not talking about the food.
We'll get there. You have to have patience. Okay? So that's the second level. Now, but even if they get the main message or they get the storyline, you definitely can say that every ounce of the play, they feel how the message comes through. Then you have the main character. The main character has to understand the play in order to give it over. But, so he will, for example, when it comes to the script, his own script at least, he will know why it's important to emphasize a certain word or to say it in a certain way and how that connects to the main message. But you can't say that he knows everything, how they all connect to one unified message. When it comes to the author and the director, in his mind there is one message. He's giving this whole play for one message, and if it's a good play, he's giving every ounce of the play and every detail of the play, all connect to that one message. He maybe can't describe consciously why it's important that prop should be that way and not this way, but he feels that if it will be different, it will ruin the whole play. Every minor detail is part of this one message. So the same idea is with the four worlds. So it's one creation. There's no many creations. It's one creation, but it's a different point of view. There is a point of view in our world, in Olam Asiyah, where we hardly get the message. We just see the things happening, props happening, but most of us don't even get like the main message and not even the storyline. We are the prop managers that we're busy with the props, taking it from one place to another, say technical things, but we don't get to we have a hard time even to see if there is a message at all here. Forget about knowing what it is. Like, is there a message, or just this is like by itself? There's no message here. It's a chaos. So that's the lowest level. That's Olam Asiyah. Then you have Olam Yetzirah, where if you look from that perspective, you will see at least the message, although there are certain parts that seem like outside of the message. Then you have Olam Abriya, the level of the world of creation, where you have, let's like similar in the metaphor to the main character of the play, where things pretty well connect with the main message. And then you have Olam Atzilus, where there's nothing outside of the main message. It's all one. That's the world of unity, where there's practically, it's almost like, is this a world or is this God? It's like not clear, because what is a world? A created world is something which is outside of God, at least seemingly outside. So it's not part of His oneness. Then therefore, there is this big curtain, so-called, between the two, because Atzilus is not really clear. Is it emanation or is it next to? So is it a world which is really like part of God? Or is it a world which is already a created world, which is something outside of it? It's so, all the parts of the external parts of the play connect so well to the internal message of the play in the eyes of the director that he doesn't even see different parts. He just sees one thing. He just sees one message. And then once we get to Olam Abriya, there's different creatures that seem outside of God. They all represent God, but it seems like there's a God and there's this creature. So for example, that's why in Kabbalah it says every spiritual creature, even souls or angels, starts from Olam Abriya. Above Olam Abriya, there is no creatures. There's just the 10 Sefirot, but there's no creatures. So the question is the 10 Sefirot, is that creatures? Is that a created phenomena, or is it an essential part of Him? Right? Just like we mentioned here before. And but definitely above Olam Atzilut, above the world of creation, there is only God, only His essence. And below Olam Atzilut, it's a created existence. And if we look at this metaphor, we could also a little bit understand the idea of, how do you call it? How do you call this?
Helix.
Chain of helix.
Helix.
Why? Because this is the idea of Seder Ishtalshelus, that you find the most basic phenomena in an existence, and you say these phenomena are a mirroring of a higher existence where they exist on a higher level. So really it's just like that certain prop which is there in the play, that exists in the mind of the prop manager, but it also exists in the mind of the viewer and also exists in the mind of, or the eye of the director. It's the same idea, but that same idea becomes more physical, or if you go one way, or becomes more spiritual if you go the other way. Yes?
I'm not sure that I understand very well, understood, because you said there is a curtain, and down the curtain also angels and prophets, are there.
Yeah.
They are holy people, but Atzilut means that it's like something with Shekinah, or it's not true, because if Atzilut is after, then it's similar to Ein Sof, no?
Yeah, it is similar. That's why it's like
But what's the
not clear if
I
it.
don't understand that how can we describe the Atzilut? What's the difference between Atzilut and Ein Sof? Because
And I'll explain you. The difference is that in Atzilut you have the 10 Sefirot. So there is ways to describe him. There is knowledge, there is greatness, there is kindness of him, of God. You're speaking of God, but you're speaking of God in terms of description. In Ein Sof you cannot describe. That's what we learned in the last 2 hours.
I understand.
So when we come back to the text here, so
But okay, there is a curtain, yes. It's strange that there is a curtain, okay, but it can strongly separate the Atzilut from the other three.
I guess it works.
Because it looks like here, like this. This is the same, but here is the. No, it's this, and this is the same.
Yeah, but it just, once you get from Atzilut to Bria, it becomes a totally different quality. There is a big jump. There's a big jump between the two. So what we read here is that when the Rambam said that God is logic, so the way he said it, he said, yes, the sages of Kabbalah agree with him, but just on the level of Atzilus. So here, yes, God, looking from here, God is knowledge. There is Sefirot here, but not above Atzilut. Above Atzilut, once you get to the essence of God, there is no attributes there. There's no describable attributes there.
Is it that, like you see, Atzilus could be either close to or emanation, so.
Right.
But I guess even if something is close to, there's a relationship.
Right.
When we say Atzilus, that means there's a very, very, very basic relationship. Either a relationship between the emanator and the thing that is emanated,
right,
or the thing that is next to me,
Yeah.
Etzli, right?
So what are you saying?
So I'm saying that that's why knowledge, which is also a relationship,
Right.
takes place in Atzilus.
Yeah, because it's already outside of his essence.
In Bria, it's clearly outside. It's a creation already,
Right.
completely. But even in Atzilus, there's a relationship.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
that's why knowledge is already there in Atzilus, not in
Yeah.
Bria.
Right. And actually what we're saying with this is that when he creates Atzilus, he doesn't create creatures. It's like imagine like this. When you do something, Michael, when you create something, so there is you, and there is the tools with which you create, right? So there's, first of all, it can be tools outside of you. So let's say you have a hammer, you have a saw. You have a different tools outside of you. But then there's also your inner tools, right? So there's, for example, if you don't have the tool of logic, you couldn't create anything. Because in order to create it, you have to understand what you're creating, and you have to imagine the way it's going to be. So it's also a tool. But that's an essential tool. It's like In order to build a house, you have to buy a saw and you have to buy a hammer. You don't have to buy logic because it's in you. But God, so-called, needs to first create the inner tools in order to create. So that's what happens in Atzilus. He doesn't create creatures which are outside of him, but he creates in himself the inner tools like logic and emotions, these basic ideas. So this is, by the way, I think where, I mean, as you know, firsthand, my knowledge of Platon is very limited, but as far as I understand, this is a major difference between the way he describes spirituality and the way we describe spirituality, because he describes spirituality as ideas, as high ideas. And these are high ideas are determined and essential. We say even ideas are not essential. They are a creation. That's a major difference between the two. Any questions, guys?
Maybe a stupid question, but I don't understand.
No problem.
But if we say that Atzilut can be like Hashem, like the part of Hashem or something, or God.
Sort of.
But like this is the highest level, but it is.
It's the created part of Hashem. Let's say, put it this way. Like if there's an essence of Hashem, that's Ein Sof, and Atzilus is the created part of Hashem. The ideas in Hashem.
But how can we make parts like these two parts? It's not.
How can we make two parts of what?
Like the Atzilut and the Ein Sof, because if it's the same, no?
What do you mean is the same? Ein Sof is indescribable.
Because Hashem is Hashem, no?
It's true, but let's say you are you, but you are, there is your intellectual part and your emotional part, right? It's still
No,
you.
like this, because I can understand Derech and
Beria.
Yetzirah and Asiya.
Mm-hmm.
These are from God, but this is not
Him.
like Hashem's level. Yes, because they are also the angels, like in the Derech, or the prophets are also in the Derech, or angels, or it's the same.
I'm not sure. It's I mean, depends. It depends. It says that that some of the prophets are able to elevate themselves. When they see God, they see it in Yetzirah, some of them see it in Bria. Moses saw it in Atzilus. So Moses,
Sure is.
he saw God in the way he's in Atzilus. He wanted to see the way it is in Ein Sof, but that God told him, no.
But Moshe is also not in the Atzilut,
But he elevated himself to Atzilut.
Yes,
So
but
he got the perspective of Atzilut.
he's the nearest. So he's
Yeah.
the nearest
Yeah.
to Hashem.
Yes.
And the angels, much more like the angels.
No, angels, there are some angels in Bria, some angels in Yetzirah.
So some angels are in the same level with Moses.
Some are lower.
Sorry?
And some are
Some
lower.
are lower.
Yes.
Sorry, but I didn't know this. I just...
No, yeah, no problem. All right.
Can you articulate it maybe in terms of Tzimtzum? I mean, Tzimtzum, where exactly Tzimtzum takes place? Because in one way or another, the dynamic, which we call Tzimtzum, is God splitting part of himself out of himself.
Yeah.
It's this transition between the unity of God and whatever you want to call duality, which is internal to God already. Even with saying Atzilus is already dual.
Right.
Right? If
Multiple.
You're saying there's what?
Multiple.
Yeah, at least there's
There's Chokhmah, there's Binah, there's...
Yeah, I'm saying even before that, by saying Atzilus, as we're saying that it's next to,
Right.
it's slow. So that already implies duality, two things,
Right.
right? So that duality emerges out of the total, absolute, simple,
That's the problem.
the unity,
That's the problem.
through some type of tzimtzum.
Yes. And where does that Tzimtzum take place? So that's the question. Well, so usually we say it takes place before Atzilus, between Atzilus and Ein Sof. The problem is, as I explained, I tried to say before, that so in a certain way, there is, okay, you know what, let's leave it that way. I mean, in a certain way, there is some type of jump, not just between God and creation, whatever high spiritual creation, Atzilus, but even between God and His revelation. And therefore you might want to say that there's a tzimtzum, even from between Atzmus and Ein Sof. But that's like a whole different thing to itself. Anyways, but I don't want to get into it now. But in simple terms, we say that the tzimtzum is before Atzilus. But we will speak about tzimtzum next week. That's we're going to get into it more into detail.
And so
Yes.
maybe also, maybe a
Sure.
chapter